Okay, well. Alright, actions. So we go somewhere. Alrighty, good to see you all. Again. Please remember that quiz number 1 is still out there. I know some people have not done quiz number 1. If you have not done it, please do it today because the answers will be released tomorrow. And once the answers are out there, then you can't take the quiz because the answers are out there. You have access to the answers. So please get it done today. If you haven't done it, it's going to be marked late. It's just, the way it is. Also, if you haven't done the first assignment, they call it minor project or something, if you didn't answer the question or whatever, I would suggest you do it. If you want to. There are 4 more, so maybe you'll decide to do others, but I'm just letting people know that some people still haven't done it. Of course, it will again also be marked late, but get it done. Some points are better than 0 points. Alrighty, Black History Month. And I'm talking about people, American Catholics who are on their way to sainthood. Hopefully to sainthood. Hopefully they'll make it. This lady is Julia Greeley, is at the beginning stages. She is servant of God. Julia Greeley. There's a picture of her, an actual picture of her. So that's what she really looked like. She was born, we think, around 1833. And she died in 1917, I think. 1918. Died in 1918. So we don't know exactly when she was born. Some people think that she might have been born as late as 1840, but I'll stick with what's the common date given for her. She was born in Missouri, the state of Missouri, in 1833, which if you know your American history, that time the state of Missouri was a slave state. And she was black. So she was born to a slave, and she was a slave herself. She was born enslaved in Missouri. She was known as One-Eyed Julia. You can't really tell from the picture because she's wearing a hat, so you can't see, but apparently her right eye got damaged when she was a little girl because the slave master was whipping her mother, and apparently she tried to intervene, and somehow the slave master hit her in the eye or did something to her eye which destroyed or damaged her eye, so her right eye was, I guess she couldn't see out of it, so they nicknamed her One-Eyed Julia. It's kind of funny, I guess, in a tragic way. Anyways. Nevertheless, she was alive when the Emancipation Proclamation was put out, and after the Civil War, during the Civil War rather. So she was freed eventually, she and her family, and in 1879. Hello, Ms. Rainer. She and her family moved out to the Colorado Territory. It was not a state yet. It was just a territory at the time. Don't know what the local Native Americans thought of that, but Mr. Belfield, it is what it is, I guess. Anyways, so she and her family moved out to the Colorado Territory, to Denver, where she worked as a cook and a nanny, taking care of people's kids. And the next year, 1880, she became a Catholic. Okay, so she was not born or raised a Catholic. I don't know what religion her mother was. Maybe Christian. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But I don't know, because she wasn't even apparently baptized. or at least they had no record of it. So I guess they baptized her as a Roman Catholic, and that's what she became in her faith. She had arthritis. She suffered from arthritis, but nevertheless, she was very active, and she would walk the streets of Denver giving out Catholic literature to people, which is painful. I mean, if you've ever had arthritis, it can be painful to walk around and do stuff. But she also pulled a wagon with her sometimes. She would pull a wagon around to distribute food and coal, for heating purposes. People would burn coal to stay warm in those chilly months in Colorado. And she would also give clothing to poor families, so she would do charity work. And again, if you have arthritis and stuff and you're pulling along this wagon, I can imagine that it's not very comfortable and some suffering involved. But she did this at night. She would pull her wagon around the streets of the city to help people at night. Why? Ms. Uttenreither. Because she did not want to embarrass the poor white families that she might go to, because they might be embarrassed by receiving help from a black. So she still felt she needed to do her bit for Christ and help everybody. But again, there's racism and there's prejudice. People wanted help, but they were looking at the skin color of the person offering them help. So she would do it. She would accommodate that by going at night, so she wouldn't embarrass anybody. And so she was known for this, and she was known as the Colored Angel of Charity, which, those are the times they spoke. That's how they spoke. So that's just how they referred to her, the Colored Angel of Charity of Denver. And so she was recognized as a good and holy woman, and they have opened up her cause. The Archdiocese, presumably the Archdiocese of Denver it was, because that's where she died, has opened up her cause. And so she's at the earliest stage. If you watch the video from Thursday for our canceled class, not canceled really, but on campus meeting was canceled. Then I go over the different stages or levels for the procedure of finally officially declaring someone as saint of the Catholic Church, and the lowest level is servant of God. So they're just at the beginning stage of recognizing her as a very good and holy woman, and investigating any writings she may have left, or writings of people who may have known her. I mean, I'm sure the people who knew her are dead now, long dead, but maybe they left some writings describing her and stuff like that, so they can, gather evidence to present to the Vatican. So she can maybe go to the next level, which would be, anybody? What's the next level up from servant of God, Miss Francis? How did you know that? Huh? What lecture? You mean the one on Thursday? You watched the video? Why do you send me these people? What? Do you see what I have to deal with, Ms. Winko? Learning, Ms. Rayner. It has to stop. Yes, venerable. Thank you, Ms. Francis. That'll be the next stage. So I hope she gets up to saint, because she seemed to have been a good woman, and I ask for Julia's prayers. Amen. Hinduism. Where did I end? Yeah, I think I made it through the historical section of Hinduism. Made some changes to the PowerPoint. I'll have to put the new one up on Canvas. Yeah, okay. Yes, okay. So let's start with the sacred writings of Hinduism, of which there are many. There were no sacred writings for Hinduism at first. Okay? Writing things down was a later development. Okay? As most ancient cultures and ancient religions, things were passed on orally by talking. Okay? Writing only developed in maybe the 3000s BC amongst human beings. And before that, people were, God bless you, I'm right there with you, Ms. Edgebeth, but I got to keep it together, you know? People were drawing pictures and stuff like that at a very long time ago, but writing itself, using symbols to represent the sounds that come out of our mouth that communicate meaning, no, that's a late development in humankind's development. So there were no sacred writings at first in Hinduism, this very old religion. The revelation that people felt that they had from the supernatural realm or ultimate reality was passed on by word of mouth, from teacher, guru to student, oftentimes by singing, because that helps with memory techniques. But as things became more complicated and harder to memorize, Mr. Vital, writing proved useful, and writings began to develop, and sacred writings, God bless you, began to develop even in Hinduism. But it's really, writing the sacred writings down is not the norm for Hinduism. Okay, the norm is still for a teacher to pass them on orally to students. That's still the traditional way to teach young boys and stuff like that, by teaching them how to sing the sacred writings. And the fact that the sacred writings were written down is actually a sign that we're in an age of degradation and decay. That people can no longer just from memory remember the revelation. They have to have a memory aid in a writing. Okay, so writing is actually not a good thing in Hinduism, even though it's kind of preserving the writing. So the Hindu sacred writings can be divided into two kinds, two main kinds, Shruti and Smriti. Shruti and Smriti. Shruti comes from a Sanskrit word which means something that is heard, a sound. And Smriti comes from the Sanskrit word of what is remembered, a remembrance. Okay? So one is a sound like the sound of the universe, the music, and another way of putting it is like the music of the universe that ancient wise men or seers, the rishis, heard. I mean, they're called seers, rishis, but really they're more hearers. They hear the music of the universe. They hear the sound of the universe, just poured in, coming into them. Okay, it's the music of the universe, and they repeat it. They repeat it perfectly. Okay, so Shruti are those writings, eventual writings, that contain the sacred and divine truth of the universe, the Sanatana Dharma, which is revealed directly to the rishis. They hear it or they see it, you could say, directly, without any interference or mediation. So Shruti is perfect. It's perfect revelation. Whereas Smriti is more indirect. Okay, it's still true. Okay, it still communicates the truth of the universe, but it's been revealed more indirectly. Okay, it's more of, this idea of memory. Okay, or thoughts, one might say. More like, say, rational reflection on the Shruti. Okay, the direct revelation. Okay, you have the direct revelation of the universe to you through the rishis, and then there's reflection on it, and that would be the things that are remembered, what we think about the Shruti when we're thinking about it. Okay? So Shruti is the eternal sound of the universe. The rishis are the visionaries or the hearers of this sound who understood it and communicated it. And there are many rishis in Hinduism. I think there's a set number. I forget how many there is in any one age, like 7 or something like that, or 14. I forget the exact number. But anyways, usually each age has its own number of rishis, and they're known for their great wisdom, and they have a lot of magical and supernatural powers. They can fly through the air, they can do yoga, for years on end, and fast for years and decades on end. So they have all these supernatural abilities. They can work nature miracles. They're great ascetics, as they said. They fast. They're also angry. So there's something about the rishis. They're usually mad. They're angry. Not mad crazy, but I don't know why. It's just a little detail I picked up in my readings. I just thought it was interesting about the rishis. There are 4 parts to the Shruti. Okay? The Shruti is broken down into the 4 parts. The main and most important part, we could say, are what are called the Vedas. The Vedas. You start with the Vedas. And then the 3 others are linked to the Vedas. They're attached to the Vedas. Okay? So you start with these writings called eventual writings, but this revelation of the Vedas. Okay, and then you have the second level are kind of like writings about how to perform the Vedas for the priests. And this will all make sense as we're going along. I'm just stick with me. The Brahmins, so they're called Brahmanas. Okay, the writings of the ritual that the priests are supposed to perform in the performance of reciting and singing the Vedas, which are really a bunch of hymns. It's a collection of hymns and songs to the gods. Then there's reflection on the Vedas called the Aranyakas, or the Aranyaks, which are more philosophical meditations on each of the various Vedas. What is the underlying meaning of the ritual that is being performed? Okay, so you have the songs of the ritual. You have the ritual itself that the priest is supposed to do. Then thought about the ritual. So what does the ritual actually mean? What's its meaning? And then you have the Upanishads, which are a more generalized philosophical reflection on the nature of reality. I guess the broader question of reality and the sacrifices and the rituals in the context of the broader question, as I said, of what is reality? What is the real? But when scholars or people talk about the Shruti literature, they're most commonly referring to that first level, which is the Vedas. Whoops. That's out of order. Sorry. The Vedas. I'll go back to put my slides out of order. I'll have to revise that. Anyways. They're mostly talking about the Vedas, which is a word that comes from Sanskrit Veda, which means knowledge or wisdom, related to our word wisdom. Wisdom, Veda. Okay, we're cousin languages with Sanskrit, ancient Sanskrit. So it means the same thing, wisdom or knowing something, knowledge. And so you could say the 4 collections of knowledge. Knowledge about what? Well, the gods, and about ultimate reality as it is. Basically, the Vedas are oral poetry. They're oral poems. They're songs or hymns that were eventually written down, scholars think, between 1200 and 600 BC. So they're quite old. And obviously, they're much older than when they were written down. And the focus of the Vedas are almost exclusively on the proper performance of ritual, especially the sacrifice. Okay, early Hinduism was very big on, sacrifice, both of animals, living things, but also other things. You could sacrifice flowers or plants, stuff like that. Butters, part of, also any kind of product could be sacrificed. But there were a lot of animal sacrifices in the early days. And you had, whatever sacrifice you were performing, you had to know how to properly perform the ritual, because if you made any mistake in the ritual, then you might, you probably would, offend the god. Or the goddess, but usually the god that you're trying to placate, that you're trying to please. and it'd be like, no, that's a do-over. You remember, that part of the ritual, where you screwed up, you poured the ghee in at the wrong time. Sorry, I don't accept your sacrifice. Do it again. But it took like 3 hours. Sorry, do it all again. You had to perform the rituals exactly. Okay? That's why I think I mentioned before in a previous class about the Hindu god with the elephant head, yes? I mentioned him, Ganesh or Ganesha. Fat little baby with an elephant's head. I'll eventually get to the story of telling you how that happened, I think. But even though he's not one of the main gods in Hinduism, he's usually the first god that you pray to in any ritual because he's the remover of obstacles. And you kind of like the patron saint of not making mistakes. So a lot of times Hindu rituals, even now, will begin with a little prayer to Ganesh, asking him to make sure that I don't screw up the ritual, so that it will be accepted by the god, because the ritual has to be performed exactly appropriately, or it's not good. So the study of the Vedas was restricted to high caste men, males, those of the priestly caste, usually. Of course, they're the priests, so they have to perform the rituals. And they had to be initiated into the power of the Vedas, so they had to learn the Vedas, learn how to pronounce them properly, and, all sorts of ceremonies for initiating them into their status as Brahmin priests. The Vedas should also be studied by other high caste males, like the warriors and the rulers and the merchants. The lower classes, no. Women, definitely not. According to legend, it was, and this is a very famous rishi, his name is Vyasa. His name will come up a lot, because I think he also wrote like the Mahabharata and other parts of the Hindu scriptures. The legend is, or the historical legend is, that one of the seers, a famous one named Vyasa, was the one who divided the one Veda, the united Veda, into 4. Which again is a symbol of the decay of the current age, because you had a united revelation and now it's divided up into 4 different ones, the 4 Vedas we're going to talk about. So the Vedas are not books like other scriptures. Okay? As I said, they were received orally through the sound of learning, and even today, learning how to sing the hymns properly, pronounce the words properly, so you have to learn proper breathing for pronouncing the various hymns of the Veda. And so they were drilled into the memory. The 4 sections that traditionally this man Vyasa, this Rishi Vyasa, divided them into are, well, there they are. The Rig, first, the Yajur, the Sama, and then something called the Atharva, which we'll get to. And there's a picture of a copy of the Rig, I think. The Rig, yes, from the 1700s. And it's written in Sanskrit. Can you see? I think there are little corrections here and stuff like that in like red ink. Maybe you can see them. But anyways, this is how they do books in the East. A lot of times they don't do books like we have them like this. We open them up. But the book, you open it up like this. Okay? So you have the book like this and you're opening it up like that. Okay? And it's usually it's on strips, so it's much broader and wider and thinner, like on strips. When you're opening it to read. Okay, so what's the Rig? The Rig is the basic collection of hymns. These are we could also say prayers, but they're not really prayers. They're more songs to different gods, mainly gods, I think, sometimes goddesses. And the word Rig is from Sanskrit, which means praise or verse. Okay, so verses of a hymn, yes, a Rik is each verse of a hymn. So the Rig Veda or Rig Veda Samhita, the collection of the verses of knowledge. So, knowledge of how to praise the gods and the goddesses. So the most basic Veda is the Rig. And as I said, since it's the most basic, you can also assume that it's the oldest of the Vedas. Probably written down around 1200 BC. The Rig contains I wonder if I did that. I know I've got it on my computer. I know it's not on there. Oh, maybe I'll show it in the next class. Okay. Just talking to myself. It's a collection of around 1,020 hymns to various gods and goddesses. So it's long. It's a religious text. Of course it's long. Look at your Bible. Actually, in comparison, the Bible's pretty short to a lot of other scriptures. Although the Quran's not that long. So that's not bad. But Hinduism is huge. It's a whole library. 1,020 hymns to various gods and goddesses. I think there are 10 books, 10 volumes to the Rig Vedas, containing all of the, hundreds of hymns within each volume to all sorts of different gods. Books 2 through 7 are considered to be the oldest, the core parts of the Rig Veda by scholars. So books 2 through 7. And then books 1 and 10, at the beginning and at the end, are considered the latest. Or later additions to the Vedas. I don't know where they place 8 and 9 in the whole scheme of things. I guess not as old as books 2 through 7, and not as late as books 1 through 10. Anyway, so books 1 through 10 seem to be additional to the core writings. They're more speculative, okay? Then I guess speculation is a sign for scholars that there's development, and development usually happens later. It usually doesn't happen earlier. So I guess that's how they figure which books are later. And the hymns are arranged according to which god is being addressed by the hymn. Okay, so if you actually go online, and these are online, the Sacred Books of the East from our friend Max Mueller has translations of the Vedas, and I have you read from the Vedas. Hopefully you've taken a look on the syllabus. There's a selection from or at least one selection from the Vedas, one hymn, the Hymn of the Eternal Man, which is I don't think the hymn is actually addressed to any god if I go back and look, actually. But if you look at the hymns, which are online, public domain, Sacred Books of the East, you'll see I think it's the upper right-hand corner, there's the name of the god given. So Indra, or Ganesh, if it were addressed to Ganesh, Rudra, stuff like that. So you'll see, or Agni, the goddess of fire. So you'll see the names at the top telling you about which god the hymn, or to which god the hymn is being addressed. If you're curious, the most addressed god in the hymns of the Vedas, of the Rig Veda, are Indra, who scholars believe was the supreme god of the Aryan peoples. So it stands to reason that most of their hymns are directed towards Indra. Indra was a rain god. He brought the storm clouds. After Indra, the god of fire that I mentioned, I think it's a goddess. I have to look at it. Is Agni male or female? Well, I have gods, so maybe I'm wrong about that. So Agni, who is the god of fire, okay? And you can, again, see the connection between the languages, the ancient languages, because ignite, which comes from the Latin word ignis, to start a fire. Ignis, which means fire in Latin. Agni, god of fire. Okay, and that's important because these were fire sacrifices. Okay, you were burning up, and still today with Hindu sacrifices, they burn stuff up in fire. So fire is a big deal in the sacrifice. So of course, as you would imagine, there are a lot of hymns addressed to the god of fire. So Indra first, the supreme god, and then the god of fire. The second book. I wonder if I did a. No, I didn't. Okay. Wonder if I did a separate slide for each of the books. No, I put them all on one. The second book is called the Yajur, the Yajur Veda, which comes from Sanskrit yajus, which means the formula, the sacrificial formula that you would need to know in the performance of the ritual, the actual prayers. So it's defined as, or translated as, knowledge of sacrifice, the knowledge of the sacrifice. And so the Yajur Veda Samhita collection is a manual of sacrificial prayers or formulae that the priest would use in the performance of the sacrifice. There's also, in the Yajur, explanations of the ritual, mantras. We'll get into mantras. Usually people associate mantras with like meditation, but mantras are simply our sacred formulae, which in and of themselves don't necessarily have any meaning at all. It's the power, the sound of the words that generate energy, the energy of the sacrifice. It's kind of magical in a way. It's not so much the word, but how you say it. Remember, like the Harry Potter films. Remember the first film where, what's his name? I don't remember the kid's name, but it was, of course, he was like the Irish kid, so he's portrayed as some Dumbo. Remember, they're in the class trying to learn how to use their wands, and they're trying to make a feather float. And what do they have to say? Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa. But it does, and his wand like explodes or something in his face because he didn't say the words right. Not that he didn't say the words, but he didn't say them right. And Hermione has to say, no, it's Wingardium Leviosa. Yeah. All right. It's the same type of thing with the Yajur Veda. It's you have to know the mantras. It's not so much, do you understand the mantras? Not necessarily. Sometimes they could be just gibberish. But it's the words themselves and the way you pronounce them that creates the energy, creates the power. So the Yajur has mantras and stuff. There are two versions of the Yajur actually. One called the white and the black. The black version of the Yajur is longer, and scholars believe it's the older version of the Yajur Veda than the white, so the white is shorter and younger. However, the reason they're called black and white is because the followers of the white Yajur wanted to discredit the longer. God bless you, Ms. Oler, I got you. Keeping me humble, Ms. Oler. They wanted to discredit the other longer one, which they didn't like for some reason. I guess they didn't think it was as authentic, so they called that one black, and theirs was white. Okay? But really the black one, they wanted to discredit its integrity, but really the black one is the Yajur, is the longer, is the older of the two. Actually, it is the more authentic of the two than the shorter white version. Next we have the Sama Veda, from the Sanskrit word saman, which means to chant or melody. So knowledge of the melodies. So it's not just enough that you know the words of the hymn. You have to know the tune, what to sing it to. Okay, so that's where the Sama Veda comes in. It tells you how the chant should be done. And so the Sama Veda is a collection of songs and melodies used in the ritual. And it basically follows the Rig Veda. I mean, it's basically a repeat of the Rig Veda. Almost word for word. There are some differences. Obviously, it's going to provide the melody or the form of singing for the hymns that are in the Veda, although there is some rearrangement of the verses of the hymns. But, as I said, it's basically a repeat of the Rig. All but apparently 75 verses of the Rig are found in the Sama. And again, you need to know the proper pitch and the tone, because the proper pronunciation of the words of the hymn give the hymn its power, you could say creative power to the singer. Now, on the PowerPoint, you might have noticed that, the Rig, the Yajur, and the Sama are in blue color with, and they're all in all caps. The Atharva is not. It's in a lighter blue, and it's in, it's capitalized with, lowercase and uppercase. And there's a reason for that, because the Rig, the Yajur, and the Sama are considered probably the core or the basic parts of the Veda. Okay? And so they're even called the threefold knowledge. So there's that reflection, that memory in Hinduism of the antiquity, the oldness of these parts, the Rig, the Yajur, and the Sama. They're called the threefold Veda. But we have a fourth one called the Atharva. Where does that come from? The Atharva is the last of the Vedas, not just in number, it's 4, but also in time. It's probably the latest. It is the latest of the Vedas, and it's considered the lowest of the Vedas. Why? And because it's so different. The Atharva really lacks any connection to the public Vedic sacrifices. It's not so concerned with the sacrifices as the Rig, the Yajur, and the Sama are, and so it's denied status, or originally it was denied status as a Veda. People didn't recognize it as a Veda, so it was not considered part of the Vedas. And scholars still aren't exactly sure how it became part. What they think is that the people who created, or whatever group created the Atharva Veda, the adherents of whatever group this was, tried to make it look like a Veda, whatever this book that they had, the Atharva. And so they added a book of hymns for the Soma sacrifice, which is a sacrifice involving an alcoholic drink, an inebriating drink called Soma, which I mentioned in the last lecture. Maybe it came from the Aryans, the Aryan migrants. And then simply claiming that there were really 4 Vedas and not just 3, which of course included their Atharva Veda. They just said, no, there are 4 Vedas. And eventually, I guess, people just accepted that. Okay, there were 4 Vedas. They just accepted the propaganda that, that they were propagandizing about their book that they saw as equal to the Vedas or part of the Vedas, whichever this group was. They also claimed that they were the compilers of the Atharva were descendants of the father of fire, the bringer of fire, Atharvan. That's why it's called the Atharva Veda, who is a mythological figure who, as I said, brought fire worship to the Indians. Also, they claim he brought the Soma sacrifice, this sacrifice involving the alcoholic drink. So the Atharva Veda is called the knowledge of Atharvan, or the knowledge of fire, the knowledge of the fire sacrifice. This is named after the bringer of fire, Atharvan. And since fire worship was a big deal in Hinduism, and still is, attributing it to Atharvan kind of greased its way to acceptance. People were willing to accept it. Oh, it's connected to Atharvan. Oh, it's like, it must be legit then, What is the Atharva? Well, it's filled with all sorts of charms, curses, hymns for getting healings or inflicting injury on others. So kind of you could say white magic and black magic, praise hymns, philosophical speculations on the meaning of life and the order of the universe, and all of these are all mixed together. So if you look at it, it's nothing like the other Vedas, and yet somehow it kind of wiggled its way into the Vedic collection somehow. So just to give you an example, here's an example from the Atharva. Would anyone like to read this charm from the Atharva Veda? Anybody? Go ahead, Mr. Whitehawk.
From your head to your feet I implant love's longing into you. O God, send forth the yearning love. May yonder man burn for me. Favor this plan that Newman fit together at Kubi. O God, send forth the yearning love. May yonder man burn for me. If you run 3 leagues away, 5 distances, distance coursed by a horseman, and there you shall again return, shall be the father of our sons.
Excellent, sir. So that's from the Atharva Veda, book 4, or chapter 4, I guess, from the sacred books of the East. Okay? So the charm to arouse the passionate love of a man. This would be for a woman who is looking for a husband. Okay? The father, she wants someone to be the father of her sons. And that's deliberate. I mean, that's just not, sons could include daughters. No, they want sons. They want sons. Because sons perform the funeral offerings after you're dead. So you need sons. Daughters can't do it. So you need a son, especially your eldest son, to perform the funeral rites after you die. So you want males. Well, the only way she's going to get a male is if she gets a male. So she wants to, force this guy to fall in love with her. It's a charm. It's magical. So from your head to your feet, I'll make you love me. It's like a love potion. It's not just a charm, because they're also in the Atharva, it might give different recipes for making sorts of potions and stuff like that, that will go along with this prayer that you would say. Okay? So whatever man, I guess you have to be looking at the man, so have direct contact with him, to tell him to yearn for me, or yearn for you. And then she appeals to various gods. Hanuman is a monkey god. Kuti is one of the gods of Brahma, I believe. Let me look at my notes. I think I wrote it down, so I would remember. Yes, one of the the daughters of Brahma. Don't know why you particularly pray to either of them. I could ask somebody who knows Hinduism better than I do, much better than I do. But these are, gods, okay? Some lesser gods, but whatever. So no matter where you go in the world, 3 miles away, 5 miles away, or very far if you're riding a horse, nevertheless, you'll come back to me and we will do the nasty. And I'll get my sons that I want. I'll get my children. All right? So that's what's going on in the Atharva. All right? It's very different from the other Vedas. Okay? Now, what about the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas? The Brahmanas, in each of these Vedas, most of these Vedas, I should say, each of these Vedas has a Brahmana attached to it, or an Aranyaka attached to it. So there's the Rig Brahmana, there's a Brahmana for the Rig, there's an Aranyaka for the Yajur, for the Sama, okay? So these are attached to the Vedas, kind of further commenting on them and extending them. So the Brahmanas is the book regarding sacred power. The book that regards sacred power. Brahman. Okay? Brahman is the ultimate power, godlike power of the universe. It's not a god, but this is where the gods get their godliness from. Okay? Brahman. It's the ultimate reality, this godlike reality, from which power and energy, all power and energy derive in the universe. And so to control it, that's part of what the rituals are there for. You're trying to control Brahman, to tap into it. And so the Brahmanas deal with this, the sacred power. So it's book regarding the sacred power. Written down probably sometime between 1000 and 650 BC. Oh, I did put it on the PowerPoint. Okay. The various Brahmanas were written down during then. And the Brahmanas are ritual books with detailed instructions about performing the sacrifices for the Brahmins, the priests, who are your intermediary for controlling Brahman. Okay, so they get, these are all the rules they're supposed to follow in properly performing. There are also commentaries on the mantras, the formulae that are found in the Vedas. The Brahmanas also explain to some extent the sacred power, or the Brahman behind the ritual, what you're trying to get at in performing a certain ritual, what you want to get out of it. Because the utterance of the ritual, the words of the ritual, the sound of the ritual is most important for a number of things, not just for honoring the gods, but keeping the universe intact and bringing blessings on the worshiper. Okay, ritual is important because it keeps the universe going. Dharma, remember the word dharma, can mean ritual. Okay? And so it keeps, what's the word I'm looking at? It keeps the equilibrium of the universe. If ritual is performed properly, then the universe goes on forever, or at least for however long it's supposed to. If it's performed improperly, then things kind of break down. Each Veda has a Brahmana text associated with it. So the Rig, the Yajur, the Sama, and the Atharva each has an accompanying Brahmana. Later, there were added what were called the Aranyakas. Aranyakas in Sanskrit means of the forest, so books of the forest, or sometimes translated as the forest meditations. Why, I didn't put the date on. Around 1000 BC is when scholars think that it was written down. Confusing. I think that's 1000 BC. Why in the forest? Because they were secretive. Okay, these were special teachings that you would only give to special people. Okay, so they were given secretly in the forest because some people were worried that maybe other people might think that they were inappropriate for common knowledge. The Aranyakas were developed in combination with the Brahmanas. So there's a co-development there, as you can see from the date, 1000 BC. So developed in combination, and each Veda has one grouping, except for the Atharva. So there's an Aranyaka for the Rig, the Sama, and the Yajur, but there is no Aranyaka for the Atharva, which might be another indication, scholars say, of the lateness of the Atharva, and that it was not considered part of the original Vedas. The fact that no Aranyaka accompanies it, none was ever written for it. So what are the Aranyakas? Well, they're explanatory, they're speculative, they're giving secret, maybe what they might have considered dangerous knowledge about the sacrifices, and their true meaning. You think you're doing this during the sacrifice, but really this is what's going on. Or when the priest does that during the sacrifice, we'll tell you what the ultimate meaning of it is, its real meaning. So there's a lot of theorizing on the ritual of the sacrifice and what the fire means especially. And so each part of the sacrifice, Ms. Utton right there, God bless you, keeping me humble, Ms. Utton right there, is kind of symbolized, has some symbolic value. There's some symbolic value between the sacrifice, the person, and ultimate reality. Okay, so maybe that's why they considered it dangerous for people, because people might be like, so what, the sacrifice really doesn't do anything? It's not really necessary, because it's all symbolic of something else. It's all, so maybe that's why they didn't want to make people, lose faith in it, I guess, about the literal meaning, or the literal, one might say, or actual impact or force of the sacrifices. By overly spiritualizing it to, it's just a symbol of something else. Maybe. I don't know. But that might be one reason why they wanted to maybe withhold this teaching from the common people. They don't want to destroy their faith in the sacrifice. And then finally we come to the Upanishads. The Upanishads. Which is a word, actually it's 3 words from Sanskrit, Upanishad, which means to sit down nearby someone, which indicates, the position of the student with the guru. The guru sits, and the students all sit down near the guru on the ground, listening. That's the traditional form of Indian teaching style. The guru sits above you, and you all sit down on the ground in front of the guru. So you are sitting down nearby, your Upanishad. And so the Upanishad is a series of lectures and talks that are given by a guru to his students. I've used this word guru already. I've said teacher, so hopefully you've kind of made the connection yourself already. That's simply a word for a spiritual guide, a teacher. Okay? It's just that simple, really. The word guru, does that matter? Yeah, I'll pass on that one. The Upanishads, they were, well, that's what I put down in my PowerPoint, circa 600 BC. My notes are a little bit different, though. I wonder where I got that from. Should I follow my notes or the PowerPoint? I guess I'll go with my notes. So I'll make a correction here, because I have 700 to 300. Is when we date the various Upanishads, plural, because there's more than one of them. There are a lot of them. I mean, there's the official collection of the Upanishads, like maybe the best ones. They're actually more than just you'll find in an official collection. Yeah, Mr. Prinzio. Yes, they're always going to be male. Yeah. Nowadays you have, I think, Guruni is the feminine form. So you will have women. And that doesn't mean that women don't teach, maybe in an indirect way, non-formal way, like mothers teaching their children and stuff like that. And that there aren't great Hindu women in the stories. But yeah, typically the guru is going to be a man and his students are going to be men. Yeah. So what are the Upanishads? As I kind of told you, they are dialogues between gurus and their students, generally talking about the identity and the relationship of the person, the individual self, to ultimate reality. What is my personal relationship, you could say, to Brahman? Okay, what is my personal identity in regards to ultimate reality? How do I relate to it? And I give you a reading from the Upanishads. I think I give you a reading from the Upanishads. Or maybe I don't. Maybe it's not here on the PowerPoint. There we are. Yeah, it's on the PowerPoint. I give you a reading from the Bhagavad Gita. That's right. The Upanishads and the Upanishadic literature bring to an end the Vedic tradition. Kind of ties up the Vedic revelation with a bow, you might say, brings it to its ultimate point of explaining, I guess you could say, what is the ultimate point of all the things that we're doing, all these rituals. Am I going to do that? Well, I guess I'll have to. Yeah, I guess I will. Okay. And this literature, I'll get to that in the next slide. Now I have to go back because my slide is out of order, but sorry about that. And this literature is called the end of the Vedas, the Vedanta, the end of the Vedas. You might say the conclusion of the Vedas, or in a way confirmation of the Vedic teaching. Okay, the Vedanta. There's this period of ordered, systematic reflection on the Vedic revelation, commentary on the Vedic revelation, and its ultimate purpose in Hindu life. So the Vedanta is a body of literature which completes the Vedas. Okay? Very simple. Right? That's exactly what Vedanta means in Sanskrit. And you'll see that there are actually three pieces of literature, I guess I'll say. The Upanishads, which the Upanishads is part of Shruti. Okay? And then these other two, which are actually part of Smriti. So they're different levels. So just so you're aware of that. The Upanishads, which we already talked about, very important. Okay, so they're up with Shruti. And then these other two pieces of literature, the Bhagavad Gita, which we'll talk about later, and the Brahma Sutra, which is a commentary. Sutra is kind of like a commentary in a way, and little short phrases. Maybe, not proverbs, it's not the right, aphorism is a better way to put it. But little short phrases about stuff. that don't really explain themselves, but they demand commentary. How to explain it? It's kind of like a sutra. Think about Jesus, a saying of like Jesus, like one of the sayings of Jesus is, "It is better to give than to receive." Okay, that's an aphorism. It's a short statement. It makes sense. That's kind of like a sutra, all right? It doesn't explain anything. You have to kind of maybe think about it. Well, what does that mean? Give to whom? Receive what? What are you giving? And to whom are you giving? So people might write a commentary on that little statement. Sutras in Hinduism are like, hundreds of those little statements that are linked together. And then people would necessarily write commentaries, as you might expect, write commentaries on these sutras, What does so-and-so mean when he says in this sutra such and such, that we should do this, or that ultimate reality is like this? People would reflect on it. So the sutras don't necessarily explain their meaning. Just give you these short statements that are probably meant to make you think about what they mean. Right? So this is one of them, the Brahma Sutra, which was written around the 500s AD. And the purpose of the Brahma Sutra was actually to sum up and bring order to the teaching of the Upanishads. Okay, so like the Upanishads was kind of confirming and commenting on the Vedic tradition, and so someone comes along with the Brahma Sutra and is like, okay, let's make things clear from the Upanishads where they might be unclear. So let's comment on that. Right. So the Vedanta. Yeah, I'll get to that. Would anyone like to read this little snippet from the Upanishads called the Parable of Udalaka? Udalaka. Go ahead, Mr. Belfield. Thank you.
Especially the fruit. Yeah, especially the fruit of the Ayagadra tree. Here is one, sir. Break it. It is broken, sir. What do you see there? These seeds almost extremely small. Break one of them. It is broken, sir. What do you see there? Nothing. Not anything, sir. The father said, my son, that fine essence which you do not receive there, that the very essence of this great Ayagadra tree is. Believe it, my son. That which is the fine essence in all that exists as itself. It is the true, it is itself, and you
Good. Are it. Okay. From one of the famous Upanishads, the Chandogya Upanishad. Alright. Udalaka is said to be his father, who's teaching his son, but probably, that relationship of a guru to a student is also defined familially as a father to a son, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that Udalaka is, literally his biological father, Shvetaketu's father, but Udalaka is talking to his son, Shvetaketu, and they have a number of discussions and examples that Udalaka gives to him. They're supposed to kind of unlock his identity, or the identity of the self with ultimate reality. And he uses a number of different images. In this case, it says, take this fruit from this tree, break it open, and look at the seeds. Okay? So I've done that. All right, then take one of the seeds and crush one of the seeds and look into the seed. What do you see? Nothing, sir. And he said, yes, that thing that you do not see, or that reality that you do not see, that fine essence, okay, which you don't perceive. This is what you are. This is what the tree is, but it's also what you are. Okay, this essence in all that exists has itself, is the self, basically. It is the true, and you are it. So, basically he's saying we all come from the same source, ultimately. And if we all come from the same source, then we are all the same thing. So I am the seed is the fruit is the tree, the tree is, if you keep going back and back and back to the beginning, is ultimate reality. Okay, so that's what the knowledge is, that there's or the knowledge that you should gain from this teaching or this parable is that ultimately there is no difference between you and Brahman and what is ultimate source of existence, because everything comes from that source of existence. So there's no real distinction between you and Brahman. Yourself, you could call it the soul. The word in Sanskrit is used that's used as Atman. Your Atman, the permanent individual self, is the same as Brahman. And if you remember what I said before, Brahman is a godlike reality, which means that therefore you as a human are a godlike reality. And getting to that knowledge is the point of all the ritual then. What's the point of it all, of everything that we do as Hindus, if you're a Hindu? To get to that liberative, freeing knowledge that you are Brahman and Brahman is you. Tattvamasi. Sanskrit. Tat Tvam Asi. You are that. You are it. That thou art. Okay? In older English, you can see maybe more of the connection with Sanskrit. That tat Tvam thou, or thu asi art. You are that. And that's a mantra. Okay? That's a mantra. That's a powerful statement that Hindus will recite over and over again, taken from the Upanishads. Also, other statements like "You are Brahman." You and Brahman are the same, basically. That's what it's leading to. There's no duality. There's no two. Advaita. The word dva is from the word for two in Sanskrit. A means no, just like in English. Agnostic, no knowledge. Okay? Two, no two. So there's a non-duality. There is really no distinction, no difference, the difference we think we see in the universe between us, between other creatures, between other inanimate objects like rocks or planets or stars or black holes. Actually, there is no difference between us and them and ultimate reality. But why do we think there is? Well, then comes into play in the Upanishadic thought this idea of Maya, illusion. We deceive ourselves. The world, the difference that we see in the world, the multiplicity of beings, of stuff, is really Maya. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. The physical world is deceiving us into thinking there is all this difference when there really isn't. It tricks us into not realizing that there's total identity or complete identity between our Atman, our personal self, and Brahman, the ultimate reality. And to realize this truth, this is what leads to liberation. This is what leads to liberation from, say, rebirth. Keep dying and coming back. I'll talk about this later on when we talk about Hinduism. But the idea that, reincarnation, that you keep dying and coming back in the cycle of death and rebirth. You break that once you have knowledge of the truth, which is that there's really, there's nothing coming back and dying and coming back because it's all one. It's all the same. Now, how do you realize that? Knowledge. You have to meditate. That's where meditation comes in. And yoga and stuff. That's what yoga is for. Yoga is not for stretching. Okay? It is stretching, but it's not why it was devised. It's meant to be done. There's physical pain involved, so there's some kind of asceticism or exercise involved. But it's supposed to be done with a person praying a mantra, meditating on the mantra while they're doing these uncomfortable exercises in order to ultimately, through the pain and the energy that's created, the heat and stuff, to unlock the mind to realize that really Atman is Brahman, that you actually unite, you get this experience of union with ultimate reality. That's what's going on in yoga. It's not to make you feel peaceful or calm down and stuff like that. I mean, those are side benefits maybe, but that's religious practice. That's not the point. Okay, yeah, I'll stop here and continue on Thursday. God bless you all. Have a good day. You're welcome, miss. Have a good day. Oops. Started recording. Have a good day, sir. Thank you.